Today on Dirt Lifestyle, the objective is very simple. We've got to build a roof rack for our Gambler 500 vehicle. I don't know exactly which route we're going to go with it, but we're just going to start making lines out on the floor, cutting and bending tube, and welding it together. Today's video is brought to you by Empire Abrasives. All of the abrasive discs, cut-off wheels, the belts on my belt grinder, everything you see that has to do with abrasives are all things that I got from Empire Abrasives. The cost of raw materials like steel, aluminum, all the stuff that we like to build with has gone through the roof lately. So like many of you, I am trying to find any way I can to save a little bit on the budget. Empire Abrasives has the best prices in the industry while still maintaining a high quality product. And if it's your first time shopping with them and you want to save an additional 10%, use coupon code DIRTLifestyle at checkout. I know I'm not the only one that loves that rally look, and I think that this Mini deserves that rally look. So we're still going to lift it and put tires and all that stuff here in a week or two, but I want to start with the rack, because to me this rack is going to be the biggest challenge by far of this entire build, and I just want to get it out of the way. So rally stuff looks cool because it almost looks like you're bolting things that don't belong onto a very stock looking vehicle. Whereas like if you, like with this Land Rover, you know, you put big lights and whatnot on top, it all matches. It fits this Land Rover very well because of the curves and the lines and whatnot of this Land Rover. It looks like an SUV. But what's cool about rally cars is they still look like cars that you bolt a bunch of off-road accessories to. And it needs to look a little bit gaudy, but it's a fine line between gaudy and ugly. You almost want it to look slightly ugly in order to make it look cool and look rally. I hope that makes sense. So my plan is that I want to put some big old lights on the front, and these lights are going to have a bar that goes around it. And sorry for the very crude Mini Cooper drawing, which is a Mini Cooler theme build. But what I'm planning on doing is trying to make the front portion of this rack 180 degree bends on the sides. I'd like to put some little connection pieces here and then build the back part of the rack after that. So we're gonna start with what I think is gonna be the crown jewel if we can get it to look okay. And we're also limited on what material I can bend because I only have 2 dies. We've got an 1.5 inch and an 1.75 inch. So for this, we're gonna use 1.5 inch since it is a smaller bodied vehicle. And I'm just gonna start bending stuff right now, and we're gonna see if we can build this light rack the way that I see it in my mind. The plan for this weird halo light bar thing is actually pretty simple. I'm just going to make 280 degree bends, and I'm going to marry them together with a couple of sleeves and some butt welds. And since this isn't really a structural piece, it's more for aesthetics, it doesn't really matter how strong it is, butt welds are going to work just fine. I like it. It's not perfect, but I like it. It's gonna pass for sure for a Gambler build. I haven't built one of these like light cage halo things before, but it's so rally looking, and that's why I was very motivated to experiment with that on this project. Because I mean, there's a lot more forgiveness when you're building a Gambler vehicle than if you're building something that you want to take to SEMA one day or whatever, right? So anyway, now that I know that this complex shape is gonna work, and I think that it's gonna look good on our, I almost called it a Land Rover. I've been working on Land Rover too much. On our Mini Cooper, we can work on the basket. And the basket is basically just gonna be how do I describe this? 2 squares stacked on top of each other. So we're gonna start with our lower square, and what I wanna do is just put a 90 on this corner, a 90 on that corner. I'm gonna randomly just choose a number to where I've got some extra tube that's gonna hang out over the windshield. And then once we get our 2 90s married together and we get it bolted to the roof, then I can figure out how I'm going to connect the lower part of this basket to this light halo thing. And then once I get that all welded together, we can start on the upper part of the basket, which is just gonna be a slightly smaller square shape. And so there's obviously a lot of details between here and there that I need to figure out, but
I like to build as I go, and that's exactly what we're gonna do today.
When I build projects like this, all my momentum is based on the fact that I'm just building what I know first, and then all the stuff that I don't know slowly works itself out towards the end of the project. I know that each one of these rear corners is going to get a 90-degree angle, so I bend a 90. I don't know exactly how long I'm going to need these pieces, so I make it extra long, knowing that I can just trim it later once I get this mounted to the roof of the vehicle. In my opinion, these kinds of projects get huge delays just by sitting and thinking about it too much, and so I just tackle all the stuff that I know is concrete and I know that I can't change. And usually the rest of it works its way out as I continue on the project. I don't know how professional fabricators handle tasks like this, but I use 2x4s all the time to help hold things in place. I've always been the kind of person that just tries to maximize everything that I have to do the best job that I can. So whether it's a really expensive, nice welder, or it's a really cheap chunk of 2x4 that I have from a leftover project, I always try to utilize the stuff laying around in my shop to make every job a little bit easier.
I'm fully aware that I might be losing some of you guys. It's a radical look, but I promise you, once we mount some lights in there and we polish off some of the other details of this rack, this is gonna start to make sense on this vehicle. And it's really gonna start to make sense on this vehicle once we lift the Mini Cooper, we put it on bigger tires, and we build a front tube bumper with a dope skid plate. So just hold on. I know it's a radical look, but I personally think that this looks very rally. Once we mount the lights in there, it's gonna start to make more sense. And once we start to complete the rest of the rack, this is like 95% of the rack is complete at this point. And I changed my mind on the upper perimeter piece. I don't think we need that anymore. What I'd like to do instead is just leave it this low profile, but in order to make this not look so much out of place, we're gonna put some pieces of tube that's gonna connect to it that will give it more support, but more than that, it's gonna help blend it into the rest of the rack, because right now we kind of have a dead space up here, and that's why it looks a little bit funny. So what I want to do is I want to run a piece of tube right across here, and then we're going to put two little pieces to go up that will be supporting the upper portion of this rack. So it's going to make a lot more sense once it's all done. So right now I'm going to carefully remove this off of the Mini Cooper, bring it over to the table, and we'll start just doing some more welding when it's not on top of the vehicle, and we'll start adding these last little pieces to it.
We have quite a bit of time and work wrapped up in just putting everything together and tack welding it in place. So the last thing we want is to knock one of these legs off while we're moving everything around. And for that reason, I'm gonna finish weld the majority of this rack to make it to where as I'm moving things around, I don't bump something and knock it out of place and then have to mount it back on this Mini Cooper and reset it with a couple more tacks. When I'm finished welding a piece of this size, I like to kind of bounce around and spread the heat out evenly. We don't want to have too much distortion or too much warpage by the time we're done finished welding this piece and have it not fit correctly whenever we put it back on the Mini Cooper. Just a Gambler build, I'm actually doing quite a bit of experimentation, and the way that I'm mounting the lights is a great example of that. Typically, I just weld a light tab and then bolt the light down into it, but in this case, I'm going to experiment by just drilling holes into the front of this halo bar and installing an M10 riv nut. The hardware that came with these lights is an M10 bolt, so I'm just going to put an M10 riv nut directly into the tube and seal it up tight with some construction adhesive. The experiment for me is I'm curious to see if this is going to be able to hold back water in a very wet environment like where I live. And I'm also curious to see how these riv nuts are going to react to a bunch of vibration with the weight of the light on top of them.
Here it is, folks. We've got a rally car inspired slash, I guess, overland looking inspired slash cooler inspired build. And I think that it turned out awesome. I think that this is going to match the character of the rest of the mods. And if you think this looks weird, I promise you it's going to start to match this vehicle once we put a lift and tires on it. I actually think it looks dope. Even with it not tall or lifted or anything, I just think it looks kind of rad on here. I'm going to be getting some questions. So I'm going to paint this whenever I paint the tube bumper that we're going to build in a future episode. So I'm not painting that today. These awesome little traction boards. I mean, come on. Could you get a traction board that matches this build better than that? They are awesome. These were sent to me from a company called Vic Off-Road, and I will put a link in the description if you guys are building something small like a Volkswagen Beetle or a Mini Cooper yourself or whatever, and you want to find out where to get some little traction boards like that. And then these car top, well, I guess they're not car top. They're just cargo boxes, are from Hills Off-Road Gear. And these are just for looks. I don't think I'm going to put anything in them. It's just going to be me and Franz in here. There should be plenty of room in the back for, you know, any gear or anything that we have. So these are just for looks. I'm going to mount those up there. And lucky for me, if it rains or whatever, I don't have to worry about it because these do have a watertight seal on the top to keep the water out. So at least they won't fill full of water as we enjoy our weekend down at the Gambler. Also, one last question that I know I'm going to be getting is going to be from those of you who are looking to build a roof rack like this yourself, and you have questions about how I mounted it onto the roof. And you saw me use those threaded rivets, and threaded rivets are actually stronger than people give them credit for if they're used in the right way. Like the fact that this rack is straddling the roof makes it to where these rivets they're not gonna take the brunt of the load. The actual design of this rack being so rigid is gonna take most of the load. But anyway, if I was going to build a rack like this and I wanted to put a rooftop tent on it or something like that, I would add a third leg in the middle here, and instead of using threaded rivets, I would use weld washers. So you just get some like 3/8 weld washers, weld those to the roof, seal it up, paint it up, and then when you mount your rack to it, you're gonna have a really solid connection. Also, one more tip, see how it bows right there a little bit? So that means that there's no cross member there. Whenever I push in the middle here, it doesn't bow at all. So if I was going to try and mount something heavy to this, I clearly would try to tie into that cross member. And like if we added a third leg into this, it would be that much stronger just because it would have 2 more points of connection, giving it 6 points of connection instead of 4. This was a really long couple of days, but it's the fastest I've ever built a rack like this. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun making this one. And if you do enjoy these kinds of videos, make sure you give the video a thumbs up. The algorithm likes that stuff, and that helps our channel grow. And if you want to see more stuff like this and you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We've got a lot of how-to content on here and a lot of off-road content on here. So if you're into that kind of stuff, stick around. If you want to help support us, you can go to thedirtlifestyle.com. We have t-shirts, hats, neck gaiters, all that kind of stuff. We have a link to our Patreon account on there as well. And if you don't follow me on social media, I'm at DirtLifestyleNate. We'll see you next time.